So I could remember you in recruiting. I could remember you in college. I can remember you when you transferred. And then I remember your coaching journey. And I feel like that's when
Mm.
you and I really connected. I'm curious if you could kind of peel back the layers back to that moment in time when you were trying to decide, what do I do with my life when your playing career was over?
Yeah, man. I one of the benefits I had of my playing career and what happened in my playing career is I always had things I wanted to do other than just play football. I think I tell that to young athletes a lot. Like I had other interests, and that doesn't mean I didn't love football. Doesn't mean I didn't want to play for a long time. But like I had other things I cared about. I started to follow business. I got my MBA when I was playing football. I started to care about other things and think about what I was going to do when I was done playing. So as hard as that transition was, when I was at the Senior Bowl, NFL Combine, thought I was about to get drafted, failed my physicals, had the knee injury, the transition was, okay, next phase of life. It's time to go be just as successful doing something else as I was playing football. And honestly, I don't know if that was a healthy mindset for me to have, but my mindset when I was 22 years old, probably a little too ego driven at the time, was like, I'm going to make just as much money and be just as successful as all my buddies who went to play in the NFL. Like that's what's going to drive me. And then, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I always loved coaching. I had been around some great head coaches in James Franklin and Mark Whipple and Bill O'Brien and seen what the great leadership looked like. And I took a stab at coaching, and that's when I went to work with Herm Edwards at Arizona State. And I'd say if there's one constant I've learned in my life, it's that like things never go the way you think they're going to. I mean, when I started coaching, I thought I was going to coach for 40 years. I thought I was going to be a head coach. I thought I was on the fast track to be a coordinator by the time I was 30. If you would have asked me 4 years ago when I was at ASU, like I'm 29 right now, turning 30 in a month, end of March, I would have thought I would have been an offensive coordinator by now at a Power 4 school. I'd be calling plays, and probably next 2 years I'll be a head coach. Like that was the path I was on, and obviously, didn't go that way for me. And I think that's the constant I've learned in life is it's things never go the way you think they're going to. The only constant is adversity, and life's all about how you really respond to it.
Yeah, I think I would agree. The first thing I tell Elite 11 quarterbacks is that quote that I'm stealing from Chris Peterson, which is, your college career, the only thing we can guarantee you is that it's not going to go exactly how you envision it, right?
Yeah.
Period. That's just
So
kind of
true.
how it works. Same thing in life. I mean, I could remember, you and I have something in common. We both were young coaches, and then we pivoted to the media. I think our pivot stories are a little bit different. You, as you mentioned, were on this fast track, and then all of a sudden, chaos hits Arizona State, and you have to figure out life. I'm curious how you navigated a moment that may have been more tumultuous than when you finished playing. Maybe not as much. I'd be curious from your lens, but I think having had to do it already one time when your playing career is over, then have to do it again in your career, I think it only gets easier every time we have to pivot.
Yeah, it was definitely a tough moment in my life. I mean, yeah, I'd say of the things that I've been through, and again, I think there's adversity we're talking about, which is like career adversity. There's like real life adversity. Like I haven't faced any of that, but like from a career adversity standpoint, what I went through at Arizona State, I think was definitely the low point in my career. At least I thought at the time. I look back on it now, and I think it's led me to a pretty great spot. And I think that leads us to a whole other conversation of like, I think you don't really know if something's good or bad until you see how it impacts the rest of your life. But at that point, man, I mean, like, here's the reality. It's that I was in the middle of a scandal very publicly. My name was in the media a lot, coming from a person who, like you said, was on the fast track. All the articles I'm used to reading were all positive, right? All the time. Amazing stories. My family's used to like sharing newspaper clips of me. And now the articles aren't good. And that was a very public situation. My name was involved in it for a year plus. And at that point too, I had to navigate, like, do I want to keep coaching? And I had opportunities, right? Like there were multiple schools that when that happened, I had opportunities to go to the NFL, to continue coaching, to do things. But again, a lot of the issue became, hey, we want to hire you as our coach, but it would get nixed because my name was just in the press for negative reasons about Arizona State, and that the investigation was still going on, and obviously a lot came of that. That was more than just me and my name in it as time went on. But for a while that was tough. So I'd say like I had to really lean on family during that time. Like my parents were awesome. I had really close friends that were great for me when I was in Arizona. But it was all about like, what do I want to do next? And in my pivot to media from that standpoint was I had seen people that I respected in media, you being one of them at the time, and you know I had seen kind of this like the trend of social media was starting to take off, the TikTokification of the world, like where like TikTok and Instagram and all this content was coming to fruition. I remember seeing what Jordan Palmer was doing on TikTok, posting videos, and I was like, man, I think I could do that. Like at this point, I'm 25 years old. I was a 5-star recruit. I was an All-American at 2 different schools. I went through the NFL draft process. I was the youngest coach in the country as the tennis coach, and like, yeah, a lot of things didn't go the way I wanted to, but I also lived a dream, and I have all this experience and perspective on the game of football that I could take to the content and media world. And that's when I kind of like went all in on it and just dove full in on content, like creating videos myself. And it's led to a bunch of different things. And from that point, everything I do now, I feel like always stems from the content. Like it always comes from videos, social media content, and that pivot I made at the end of that kind of journey at Arizona State.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that, but I want to go back for a second. I wrote a book called 5-Star QB that you're probably aware of, and it was fun because I interviewed over 50 quarterbacks, like 55-star quarterbacks, big time recruits, just like yourself, just a different position. So Christian Hackenberg is in the book. I know he's a dear friend of yours, and it's a great episode that you have on Next Up, your podcast. With that said, every time, I'm talking from Ryan Perilou from way back in the day to Christian to current guys now, like you name the player that I talk to. And there's a common question that I've asked every 5-star quarterback. You were a 5-star recruit, just as you referenced earlier. And it all has to do with like how they came out of their adversity. A lot of them were living in their parents' home. I talked to one huge recruit who's now a huge personality in college football who was in a basement for over a month and had really dark thoughts. Some quarterbacks I interviewed would tell me the story they went through, but were like, don't write about it. I can't write about it. Some were like, I don't even want to go there, Yogi. I can't even relive that experience. I'm curious for you, when you think back to that time when your name went from being in the bright lights for a positive reason to being in lights for a reason that you really couldn't even comment on, what that was like and how you eventually emerged and maybe where you were as you did.
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like in that moment you kind of have a couple choices, and I think if there's a lot of things that I haven't done well or haven't done right in my life. If there's one thing I feel like I can be very proud of, I do feel like I have chosen in moments of adversity and when things haven't gone well to try to find an opportunity and find positivity in it. Where like I feel like in that moment, I kind of refuse to let that situation dictate what my next few years were going to look like. And I think there was almost like a point where I wanted to, like, it was kind of ballsy at the time, right? Like I resigned, but essentially fired from Arizona State. All that had gone on. And like the next a few months later, I'm like making TikTok videos saying I was a former D1 coach. Like I'm like putting it out. I'm like almost in your face about it, about my coaching career and like using it to my advantage in media. So I think that, listen, there was a point where I definitely like mentally, I remember being on a plane ride when I was under paid administrative leave, as our whole coaching staff was at one point. I remember seeing some other coaches that were similar in age to me, who we were kind of peers, getting promoted to like new jobs. To like, I remember Rashad Samples, who's now at Oregon, is a great coach. I remember seeing him get promoted. We're the same age, kind of. We're both on the fast track in coaching, and him getting promoted to like offensive coordinator, and me like on paid leave. I remember like almost like I literally like tearing up on a plane. Like, how did I get to this point? Like where now I don't know what my future looks like, but I think I allowed myself a little bit of time to live in that, but kind of flipped it around pretty quickly and viewed it as an opportunity to go all in on something else. It doesn't mean that I didn't have feelings about it or it wasn't hurt, but I do feel like I turned it into a positive as fast as I could. And one of my favorite quotes is along the lines of like, some people define themselves by what happens to them. And then some people define themselves as what they make happen. And I feel like from that standpoint, like when that happened, I made something else happen because that was at that point, that's really the only choice you have. Like it's either you dwell in the past and what happened, or you create your own future. And that's what I decided to do. And I think it's obviously paid off for me from that standpoint. And I obviously had a lot of support from like my parents and everyone kind of encouraging me to go create my own path from there. There were some challenging times, but I'm definitely proud of how I handled that situation and how I, looking back on it now, turned a situation that at the time felt really negative into a positive in my life.
Yeah, I can remember having kind of off the record conversations with you, and it always felt like you had the right people around you. You often talked about your family. I can remember sitting down for a cup of coffee with you in Arizona, talking about life and the ideas in broadcasting. And I just feel like you always had what I coin like an optimistic lens, because at the core of optimism is resilience. And I think it's very easy to be optimistic and in the lens of something great is about to happen next, or something, positive will come from this. It's easy to say that when things are going well. It's hard to say that when things are challenging, and it's easy to be a pessimist. So I love that about you. And I think that's a kindred spirit element that you and I have around being optimists. So with that said, now you do a lot. Like I look at your website and then I look at the podcast, I look at the College Sports Company. I mean, on and on and on. Like it's amazing. Check it out at brenemanmedia.com. You got a lot going on.